The truth is, your excuses are killing your dreams. They're stopping you from getting every single thing that you want. And that's why in today's video, I'm gonna show you exactly how to overcome every single excuse that you have permanently in 4 steps. Realize the true cost of making excuses, identify your worst case scenario, create your excuse antidote, and prepare your excuse list. If you don't know who I am, my name's Sarah. I'm a high performance coach, and on this channel, I help you take more action towards your goals in your life and your business. So let's dive in. Okay, step 1 to overcoming all of your excuses is to realize the true cost of your excuses. What you want to do is take a little bit of an inventory and check what might have you created in the last week or the last month or the last year if you hadn't made the excuses that you've made. Truly think about it. I know it's a little bit painful to think about initially, but notice what the actual cost of the excuses that you are making is. Once you figure that out, once you know that you've got all of these dreams, all of these goals that you could have achieved, you're going to feel so much more motivated to actually overcome these excuses, because there's no way you're going to be able to overcome them unless you truly let it hit you just how important it is. And you might not think that the excuses that you've been making are really that bad. Maybe you're like, it doesn't really matter if I don't do the thing I said I was going to do one time, because that's not really a big deal. But what happens is there's this compounding effect where the more you don't do what you say you're going to do, the more that you make excuses for yourself, the more you don't do it again. Because as soon as you start training yourself to let yourself off the hook, you will let yourself off the hook when it counts. Even if it doesn't matter right now, when it does matter, you're going to be in trouble. This is why it is so important that you understand the actual cost. When you do that, you will feel so compelled to overcome them. All right, once you are really feeling the impact of what it is costing you to make excuses, then you can go on to step 2, which is to identify your worst case scenario. One of the biggest reasons that your brain makes excuses is because it's afraid of the worst case scenario. It wants to tell you that it's not ready, that now's not a good time, that you can do it later, because it is afraid of what might happen. And so when you identify what the real worst case scenario is, you get to actually face it and show your brain that it's not actually that bad. The truth is, the worst thing that could possibly happen is a feeling. Maybe it's afraid of feeling embarrassed or judged or exhausted, but that's literally the worst thing that can happen, is that you feel a vibration in your body. Let's say you're afraid of feeling embarrassed, and that is why your brain is saying, let's not do this right now because I don't want to face the consequences of doing this action if I might end up feeling embarrassed at the end. Think about how the feeling of embarrassment feels in your body. For me, it feels like a tightness in my chest and like a hot feeling on my cheeks. That is what your brain is trying to avoid. Literally a hot feeling on your cheeks and a tightness in your chest. That is the worst thing that can possibly happen if you do the action that you have been avoiding because your brain is bringing you excuses. You can sit here and feel hot on your cheeks. You can sit there and have a tightness in your body. That is all your brain is trying to avoid. So think for you right now, what is the emotion that your brain is trying to avoid when it brings you excuses? And what does it physically feel like to have that emotion? Because if you are prepared to feel that vibration in your body, then you have knocked the power out of your excuse. And now all you have to do is actually shift your excuse. And that brings me to step number 3, which is to create your excuse antidote. An excuse antidote is something that is going to neutralize your excuse. Like an antidote that you would take for a poison, you're going to neutralize or overcome the excuse. And so the way that you can do that is by figuring out the exact sentence that your brain is bringing you as an excuse. So for example, it might be, I don't have enough information to begin. That is a really common one that my brain brings me all the time. You can't possibly start this task because you don't have enough information. You need to go and do some research first. That is a sneaky little excuse because it sounds very legitimate, but it is not. So what you do is you take that sentence, I don't have enough information, and you flip it around. So that sentence would become, I do have enough information. And then you're gonna ask yourself, why is that new antidote thought actually true? And when I think about it, I'm like, well, I do have enough information to begin. Like technically I could take the first step. That is your excuse antidote. I have enough information to begin. Because here's the thing, your brain will believe anything that you provide evidence for. If you tell your brain, this is the truth, and here's all this evidence to back it up, it'll be like, oh, that sounds believable. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna believe that. The only reason that your brain is believing the excuse is because it has evidence for it. It thinks that you do need more information, and it's telling you all the reasons why. Another example of an excuse my brain loves to bring me is the thought, I don't want to do this. And when you flip that around, it becomes, I do want to do this. And the evidence is because I wouldn't have scheduled it otherwise, and because I want the end result. And when I start telling myself that, I'm like, oh yeah, I actually do want to do this. And I stop having the excuse. I've created an excuse antidote. So take the excuse, flip it around, and then come up with evidence for why that new thought is true. If this is resonating with you, let me know in the comments. I'm really curious. What is your most common excuse thought? And then what is the antidote that you've come up with to overcome it? All right, that brings me to the final step. Step number 4, prepare your excuse list. Now, there are gonna be times when you do actually have to follow through with your excuses. Stuff's gonna come up in life. It happens all the time. Things that you're not expecting pop up and you have to make an excuse. The world's highest performers know that it is not about having 0 excuses. It is about consciously choosing ahead of time which excuses count. So I get to create myself an excuse list full of excuses that I have decided ahead of time will be legitimate excuses. The rule is you have to think about those excuses ahead of time. Which excuses count? So for me, emergencies like a fire, an earthquake, a flood, that's all gonna count. Of course, I think that's probably gonna be for most people, but I actually put it on the list. I have if my granddad calls or if I get sick. I have a really specific, clear idea of exactly what sickness is and what sickness is not, and I have that written on my excuse list ahead of time. So if I just start to get a little scratchy throat and I'm like, oh, maybe I probably shouldn't work today, I'm right onto my brain. I go, nope, that's actually not on the excuse list. That is not a legitimate excuse. I did not plan that ahead of time. The best part about the excuse list is that you can put anything you want on this excuse list as long as you've decided it ahead of time. So maybe you decide that if it's snowing outside, because you never really get snow, if it snows, then you get to go and play in the snow and you don't have to do your work. Or maybe you decide that on your list is if Taylor Swift drops a surprise album, that you're gonna drop everything you're gonna do and go and listen. You can put anything you want on that list as long as it is decided ahead of time. Because again, it's not about having no excuses. It is about being in control of which excuses count and which ones don't. All right, those are the 4 steps for overcoming your excuses and getting out of your own way. Realize the true cost of making excuses, identify your worst case scenario, create your excuse antidote, and prepare your excuse list. Okay, now that you are obliterating your excuses, it is time to follow through on the things you know you need to do. So if you want to learn how to become extremely disciplined, then definitely check out my video on how to build self-discipline and learn my golden rule that will help you become someone who does everything you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe, and I will talk to you in the next video.